Snow scratched across the flats at Ludlow like blown ash, and the wind climbed the guy ropes of the tents until they sang. Before dawn, on April 20th, 1914, a woman stirred a pot over a coal stove while her children slept under quilts sewn from old shirts. Beyond the canvas, boots creaked on frozen earth, and a low thud of hooves traveled the arroyo. Then a rifle cracked like a door splintering. They had built the tent colony after the company threw them out of the shacks. Greeks, Italians, Slavs, Mexicans, Americans from the hills. Families of miners who spent their years underground for $1 and a cough. The strike had begun the previous autumn, when thousands walked off the job to demand an 8-hour day, the right to choose houses and doctors, the right to shop where they pleased, and above all, the right to bargain with a union. Colorado Fuel and Iron, the Rockefeller property that ruled the southern coalfields, answered with detectives, armed guards, and a polished refusal. Company towns emptied like pockets. Men packed wives and children into wagons and rolled until fences ended. There, on state land, they planted stakes and raised a village of canvas and resolve. All winter the tents held. They patched roofs with flour sacks and strung laundry between rattling poles. When trains rumbled past, children waved and passengers stared at the white city in the sage. The strike learned its chores: mass meetings, picket lines, relief committees, and the small work of staying human. A Cretan named Louis Tikas walked the lanes with a notebook and a soft voice, translating and steadying tempers. At night, he wrote letters that tried to make sense of it all. The guard on the ridge changed shape. First company men in rough coats, then the Colorado National Guard in blue and khaki. They were supposed to keep the peace and became the owner's long arm, billeted in depots and paid with company funds when state money dried up. Machine gun carriages perched on the heights. The miners gave them nicknames and measured their arcs. Between them stood a paper truce. On that April morning, the wind shifted and carried smoke from the guard camp. A bugle sounded. Guns edged forward until their snouts looked into the lanes. Men tumbled from bunks and sent boys to dig shallow rifle pits along the arroyo. Tikas went to meet the officers, a white handkerchief tied to a stick. The first rounds cut the air while he was still walking. Bullets licked tent edges and shaved splinters from the woodpile. Mothers dragged children toward the cellars they had scooped beneath the floor for winter storage. A woman lifted a flap, pushed 2 little ones and a baby into the hole, then followed with a quilt. Gunfire wrote its own argument across the settlement. Miners fired toward the ridge, then sprinted low between guy ropes for better ground. Others lay flat and felt the shocks come through soil as guns stitched the canvas. A man trying to pull a wagon into cover took a bullet and folded as slowly as a coat dropping from a peg. Cavalry wheeled down the arroyo to flank the pits. In the dust, a soldier seized a miner by the collar and slammed him against a pole. Another dragged a blanket from a cellar and kicked at the dark mouth, demanding anyone inside come out. Below, a woman tightened her grip on a child and pressed a quilt to small faces. The baby whimpered once and went still. Tikas moved like a metronome through the chaos, up the lane, hands raised, down to the pits to tell men to fall back, up again to wave the white scrap. He met an officer near the tracks. Witnesses later could not agree on the words, only that the soldier's jaw worked like a grinder. Somewhere a match was struck. Flames climbed a tent flap, leapt rope to rope, then left frames and smoke. Afternoon bled into evening with the colony in tatters. The soldiers spread through wreckage. The miners who could still run slid west into coulees to avoid a cutoff. Tikas stayed, pleading for time to search the cellars. He was seized, marched along the rails, and found later with his skull crushed and 3 bullets in his back. A photograph shows his body laid across a door like a plank. When the fire eased and the soldiers moved on, survivors returned. Under the ash they found holes. Under the holes they found the death pit, where 2 women and 11 children lay intertwined, blankets charred to their hands, lungs filled with smoke. Boot prints crowded the dirt around the cellar mouth. Men held their hats and bowed until foreheads touched knuckles. Someone prayed in Greek, another finished in Spanish. The wind dropped at last, and there was only the clicking of cooling iron. News outran the trains. In union halls across the West, the word was not speech, but flame. Ludlow. Miners took up rifles and dynamite and began a 10-day war across the canyons, seizing mines and driving guards and deputies into flight. Telegraph poles were cut, tipples burned. From Trinidad to Walsenburg, the coalfields clattered with boots and the double crack of fuses. Federal troops finally doused that line of fire and stilled the fighting long enough for the screams to be counted. The number accused. Scores dead in the colony and its aftermath. Hundreds across the district since the strike began. The names read like Ellis Island and Appomattox on the same page. The slaughter of women and children pinned the country's eyes to Colorado. Owners issued statements. The governor shifted. A famous foundation sent a representative to explain. Under public rage, an inquiry unrolled testimony like a weather report of cruelty. Scrip that bought only at the company store, doctors who answered to the office, houses that were rewards more than homes, deputies with pistols and little restraint. On the ground where the tents had stood, spring wind threw dust into tracks until even those disappeared. Families scattered, to cousins in other states, to new mines where a man could believe he had left the worst behind. They carried keepsakes from the ashes, a scorched skillet, a shoe buckle, a dulled rosary. The strike ended without the contract they had demanded, but photographs refused to fade. In them, the tents stand straight as teeth, gun nests freckle the hills, and faces seem to speak not only to neighbors, but to the unborn. Years later, a monument rose. On quiet days, the only sound is grass hissing against stone. School children trace dates and learn that a colony is a family, pretending a flat place is a town. Retired miners step carefully, remembering a carbide lamp's weight and rock dust settling into cuffs. A mother may lift a child and whisper the number from the pit, as if winding a watch that must not stop. Ludlow was no accident. It was a system arriving at its conclusion, wages cheaper than men, order kept at rifle point. The tents were canvas, the beliefs inside were harder. Out of that came reforms that took time to travel. 8 hours where 12 had been, safety rules with teeth, a world where a miner might dream his children would never learn the shovel's shape. The dreams are imperfect and the fights repeat, but the graves at Ludlow speak one sentence in every season: remember and reckon. Stand there in late light and imagine the wind moving from the ridge through the ropes to the quilts below, turning everything it touches into a single trembling instrument. The music is gone, but the echo remains. It moves through courthouses and pay windows, through meetings where hands rise and fall, through how we listen when someone quietly says a thing is not fair and must be made so. Memory is not justice. Without memory, justice does not know where to begin. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.